Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer: nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. We bring you the information, you do the research. And today's guest is the executive chairman of Toro Energy, an ASX listed uranium development and exploration company with projects in Western Australia. Richard Homsany, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jesse. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, happy to have you on. It's been a while since we discussed uranium, and that is my favorite of all commodities. So I'm very excited for our discussion today. I want to start off with a broad question on the sector, and that is, what are the main themes and trends you're currently watching in the uranium space that you think more investors should be paying attention to?
Sure. So, Jesse, clearly we're in a strengthening uranium price environment. And whilst there might be a little pullback here and there, we're generally on a long-term upward trend now, obviously driven by an increasing demand for nuclear energy. Coming out of the United Nations climate change conference, you saw that 22 countries committed to triple nuclear capacity to get to net zero by 2050. So that obviously signals that the uranium price is on an upward long-term trend. But the main thing investors should discern where to invest their money in the uranium market, I think, is the time to get to production. So even though countries that have very favourable uranium policy and allow uranium mining and export, you need to be aware of the length of time it takes to permit a project. So that means that for companies like Toro, where we currently have a state government that is not pro-uranium mining, you'll end up finding that any change in government policy here, and we're very confident that there will be a change in government policy here sooner rather than later, that the time to permit a project could well be sooner than in countries that have favourable policy settings at the moment. So we would urge potential investors and our current shareholders to focus on the length of time to get to production, the state of development of the asset, and focus on that in the medium to long term rather than worrying about ideologies of a minority of politicians in these jurisdictions.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a little bit later when it comes to the political ideology that seems opposed to both nuclear and uranium mining in your jurisdiction and how that might be solved. But first, I want to touch on the spot price, which you brought up there. Obviously, we saw quite a run up in the spot price to over $100. There was a lot of talk when we were in the 20s and 30s that the incentive price to mine for most mines out there was going to be around the different figures were thrown out there, but around the $70 mark. Some say adjusted for inflation, it's higher than that. What are your thoughts on those prices? Is there room to run from here? Because obviously we saw a huge spike in the uranium price in the last bull market. Could we see something similar? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, certainly $70 was the number that most Australian uranium companies and aspiring producers were using as their incentive price, and we've well and truly surpassed that number. But yes, Jesse, I'm a uranium bull. I think that there's plenty of headroom from here. You will see that uranium demand will not abate. The supply deficit will grow. There will be a need for further mines to come on stream. There'll be a need for smaller exploration companies to go hunting for uranium. Excuse me. So really, we're at the beginning of a sustained bull market here for uranium, and we see it well and truly crashing through $100 again, certainly from Toro's perspective in the short term, and, marching $150 and onwards once we break that level. We think that's all reasonably achievable in the short term, if not the medium term. So with that in mind, we're very happy to develop our asset and undertake work streams which demonstrate the value of the Wiluna uranium project that we have here, as well as the value of our exploration portfolio for uranium.
And I want to touch on all those things as well a little bit later. I do want to get your thoughts on Kazatomprom, the world's largest uranium producer, unlikely to meet production targets this year or next. We've also seen a coup in Niger that may have taken some uranium supply there offline. Russian uranium is getting sanctioned. Obviously, we've got Cameco in Canada. We've got other companies trying to bring mines online, NextGen, Denison. However, the permitting process is very long. The list goes on as to potential shortages of uranium. Where is the required uranium to fuel all these nuclear reactors coming online, being extended? Where is that going to come from?
Look, apart from the obvious places such as secondary means and rundown of inventories, Australia is the most heavily endowed uranium resource country in the world by some distance. Yet Australia is only the fifth largest historical producer of uranium. So, excuse me, we would see that Australia, where Toro is situated, is the most likely place from where all of this new production that is required will come from in the medium to long term. With the amount of resources that we have here and the amount of untapped exploration potential that exists, that's being distorted by politics and policy at the moment, which is transient and is not systemic, we see Australia as being the natural solution and the place where the world will look to meet its nuclear power needs by sourcing uranium. Because apart from anything else, apart from the sheer weight of uranium resource that we have, we're a tier one mining jurisdiction. Like we're an outstanding place to do business for mining. It's well understood, it's well regulated, and Australia is very sophisticated and can easily adapt to a burgeoning uranium mining industry here. So we see Australia as the logical place to start being a big part of the solution moving forward.
And we touched earlier on the spot price of uranium, which we saw run in. We saw run in a lot of the related equities as well. We've now entered a correction and somewhat of a downturn when it comes to the equities. Obviously, this is standard volatility for a sector like uranium commodities, infamously very volatile in general. What are your thoughts on this current downturn when it comes to the stocks? What would you say to those uranium investors online who are starting to get a little bit despondent about the price action?
Well, we've all heard the saying, patience is a wealthy man or woman. So I would urge them to remain patient, to be discerning in their selection of names in which to invest, who has the genuine production profile, and when will that production come on stream. Yes, the market did, the uranium equities reacted very well in response to the increase in the uranium spot price. And I would just say that this is just a natural correction. You'll see this as we hit certain targets. It'll break 100, then come back under. And, you know, there'll be a new floor each time we have a run, and there'll be a little bit of a retrace or pullback. But the underlying theme is that nuclear energy is on the agenda of many sophisticated nations that are democratic, and we have this global mandate to get to net zero. That's not going away. So that in itself underpins the need for uranium and a need for a nuclear fuel industry. And of course, all of these physical funds buying up pounds in the market help soak up any excess supply. So in a sense, the uranium market is almost underwritten to do well because of these themes.
Yeah, those are some great points there. I want to talk about Australia when it comes to the nuclear picture, because it's one of the few countries in the world at the moment that is not embracing nuclear energy. Some politicians out of Australia seem to be knowingly spreading misinformation about the supposed dangers of nuclear as well. Why do you think this is happening, and what will it take to turn it around?
Look, it's ideology by a few within a party, parties typically on the left that have a negative view on nuclear energy, period, and they conflate the uranium mining issue in there. And Australia doesn't need to be, for Toro to succeed, Australia does not need to be a nuclear energy adopter. We just need to be allowed to supply our uranium because it's quite lucrative what Toro has in terms of the value of its Wiluna project. We just need to be allowed to sell uranium, export uranium to our political allies, our long-term trade partners who do need nuclear energy. In Australia, the main theme being put forth is the cost of constructing nuclear power plants make it a prohibitive solution to the energy mix here in Australia, that with the increasing energy that we need here in Australia to keep the economy going. But again, because Australia is such a large nation with large amounts of unpopulated areas, wind and solar are the renewable energy sector can thrive here because of our geography. But in countries such as Japan, which are much smaller and don't have the ability to do renewables the same way a country like Australia could, Australia can get away with making these bold statements about nuclear and that it's not part of Australia's mix going forward because it's expensive. And yes, there's still some people that regard it as unsafe. But Jesse, really, this ideology is now getting more and more concentrated into a small number of people within political parties. But the political party, because of the various political expediencies that exist to win elections and having a point of difference, these small numbered ideological politicians can dominate the agenda for a particular party. But really, in the long run, even in the medium term, and I think for us in the shorter term, the needs of our trade partners, our political allies, will come to bear here and unlock all of the valuable uranium that the world needs from our country.
Well, let's pivot to discussing Toro Energy specifically. Why don't you start by giving us an overview of the company?
Sure. So our flagship project is the Wiluna Uranium Project here in Western Australia, 700 kilometres northeast of Perth, the capital of Western Australia. We have a project that comprises of 3 deposits, Lake Maitland, Lake Way and Centipede Millipede. We have 62.7 million pounds in that project, comprising those 3 deposits. That project was permitted, received all state and federal permits 7 years ago. And outside of that project in Western Australia, we have a total of 28.2 million pounds across 3 exploration projects in Theseus, Nauthanna and Dawson Hinkler. So we have around 91 million pounds of uranium at a 200 ppm cutoff. We restated some resources at 100 ppm. So at 100 ppm, we have over 100 million pounds of resource. We're currently restating our Lake Maitland deposit within Wiluna at 100 ppm. And moreover, that Lake Maitland deposit, which is one of 3 within Wiluna, has potential farm-in partners from Japan, JORD, Japan Australia Uranium Development Company, and Itochu, the well-known global trading house. They've got the right to buy into Lake Maitland a 35% interest for just under 40 million US when we make a development decision. But we concentrate on Lake Maitland because in the 7 years since that project was permitted under favourable government policy, we've been doing a lot of research and development to improve the metallurgical flow sheet, and we've come up with some significant savings through our research and development work. That research was done at laboratory scale level. Now you'll see we released earlier this week that the pilot plant we aim to construct to properly test this new metallurgical process flow sheet The design is almost complete and we'll start building it in the second half of this year. So we're quite excited about proving up that new flow sheet, which has led to some phenomenal increases in value through reduction of costs, particularly in the hydrometallurgical aspects of our processing. So that has led us to think that in the 7 years since this project was permitted, that there is a much better project to be had, leading with Lake Maitland. So we think that Lake Maitland can sustain its own mine, and the northern deposits, Lakeway and Centipede Millipede, can either provide feed to that processing operation or, moreover, sustain their own mine and process operations. So we are currently working out what is the best version of Wiluna. So unlike many of our peers who had already drilled out, completed their work and are just waiting for financing conditions to change to permit them to actually build their project, we're actually making our project better. And even last month, we released an updated scoping study just on Lake Maitland, one of 3 deposits, Jesse, only one of 3, where we've got an uplift of over $220 million in NPV to $832 million in Australian pre-tax NPV. And that's just one of 3 deposits. So you can imagine if the northern deposits are just as good or only half as good, take your pick. We're talking about, net present values exceeding $1 billion. And the government policy that, as I said, we think it's temporary and ideological and resides only within the minds of 2 or 3, no more than 4 politicians within the current government here. Once that gets all sorted and policies change or the government changes, there is an election in March next year here, and they are pro-uranium, the opposition. This company will explode in value. Either the current policy is casting too much of a shadow, too dark a shadow over our current value on the Australian Stock Exchange here. We just urge investors to really unpack this and see what the reality for this company is going forward.
That was a great breakdown. You did recently release some news, which you touched on there, the pilot plant design being close to completion with startup aimed for the second half of this year. Could you walk us through that in more detail and what it means for the company?
Sure. So, like I said, over 7 years, we've probably more, 8, 9 years, we've tried to work out a better way of processing uranium, a much more efficient way, using less reagents, using less power consumption, having a smaller environmental footprint on site, having more benign tailings. And as I said, at laboratory scale, we established successfully that there is a great hypothesis and a new way of processing uranium involving beneficiating the ore, removing high reagent consuming materials out of the ore before it goes into chemical processing through beneficiation, and through filtering that beneficiated product, removing it of all of the chlorides. And because you remove those salts and because you're reducing the volume of materials that gets processed, you instead of putting in 100 kilos into a process, you're only putting a quarter of the size or mass or volume, 25 kilos, and the grade is higher when it goes in because of the beneficiation. We've brought the potential cost of this project right down. I mean, the capex is only 200 million US now, right? And that includes a 20% contingency and a 15% EPCM charge. So really, it starts at 150 million US. You add your 20% for contingency and your 15% EPCM contractor charge to build the plant, and you've got something nice and efficient and really nice and financeable. It's not a big number. And when you consider that that's just Lake Maitland only, and it gives you an NPV of 832 million Aussie pre-tax and a stunning $30.55 all-in sustaining cost per pound U3O8 US, which is, globally one of the best numbers you'll see for a uranium project. And because we can use ion exchange in our process, we can liberate the vanadium that naturally coexists with uranium. We can use a process to easily get that vanadium out, and it acts as a really good byproduct, a credit to our costs. At Lake Maitland alone, if we're producing 23 million pounds of U3O8, we're getting also around 12 million pounds of V2O5, vanadium pentoxide red flake. And that's just cream on the cake. It doesn't make or break the economics of the project, but it just shows you that everything becomes more valuable in terms of revenue, and everything is now much cheaper because you're not using as much reagents, as much power. Your leaching tanks are now 1/3 of their original size. So the work that we've been doing has been enormous. It's been transformational for the project. And whilst these improvements and optimizations work best at Lake Maitland because of its clay-dominant lithology, they will work. We're really confident they will work, maybe not as well, but they will work at Lakeway and Centipede Millipede. So like I said, Willuna's these three deposits, one of which is worth over 800 million on a net present value. And there's two other projects waiting to happen just to the north. Whether they feed high-grade material down to Lake Maitland or sustain their own mine, in a high uranium price environment, this is an enormously valuable project.
Yeah, that vanadium extraction seems to be quite a bonus on what you've already got going on with the uranium. Very interesting. You also have a nickel project, a base metal project. You have additional uranium exploration projects and a joint venture in Namibia as well. Talk to us about those projects and the value they add to the company.
Yeah, so look, in Namibia, we're in joint venture with DPLO, another ASX-listed company that's got a project here in WA and is developing a Namibian uranium project, and JOGMEC, a Japanese government entity that we're exploring on. So that just gives us an entry into another jurisdiction, one that happens to be friendly for uranium. Our exploration projects in WA have a very good resource base, which gives us impetus to go out there and drill again and increase that resource. We're not looking necessarily for maiden hits of uranium. We've already got a resource, so it's a question of drilling out that tenure to get a higher resource. And yes, coincident with in our portfolio of assets, because Wiluna is in the Yandal belt, it's naturally prospective for gold as well. And there is a nickel mine that BHP have shut down their nickel mine now in Western Australia, but just 50 kilometres away is a nickel mine that was up and running. And we did get some significant nickel hits, massive and semi-massive nickel sulfide hits over decent widths, grading up to 3.5% nickel, 1.5% nickel. We're getting really fantastic ore grade results for nickel, but the nickel market is very much a downturn at the moment. But because these tenements were within our portfolio, we explored them for gold and nickel when uranium was $20 and below, and we managed to get exploration success. So we intend to spin those assets out into a separate IPO and listing on the Australian Stock Exchange, and we're hoping to do that sooner rather than later, and that will create value for Toro shareholders. They'll end up with free shares in a gold and nickel company. So there will be value created there from that diversified asset portfolio that we currently have.
And when it comes to upcoming news flow and catalysts for the company, what are the plans for the remainder of 2024 and as we move into next year as well? And what's some upcoming news flow that investors can look forward to?
Yes, so apart from restating our resource, we're also doing a broader Wiluna uranium project study. So we know that Lake Maitland looks to be our most economic deposit to start with. We're seeing whether the northern deposits at Lakeway and Centipede Millipede can provide high-grade feed or additional feed to a Lake Maitland processing operation by trucking that ore down, and seeing how that increases the net present value of our project and the cost profile of our project and the revenue profile of our project. So that work is ongoing, and that could produce quite a significant uplift again in NPV, and only a modest increase in costs per pound of U3O8. So that's quite exciting because it brings into play all of our permitted mining leases to provide feed to a processing operation. We will need amendments to our existing permits when the government allows. We may even need new permits to cater for a new and improved, much more valuable Wiluna uranium project. So that work is ongoing with our lead contractor, SRK, and our metallurgists. So we look forward to delivering those results in a strong uranium market, Jesse.
Great. Well, sounds like a fantastic project you've got. I would like to finish on asking you if there's anything else you wanted to cover when it comes to Toro Energy, anything else you think it's important for potential shareholders to be aware of.
Yeah, so look, I've been involved with uranium for over 20 years. One of our directors, Richard Patrizio, has been involved with uranium for that longer time also. We've got a very experienced board in uranium. Michelle now has almost 10 years of uranium experience, and our lead technical manager, Dr. Greg Shirtliff, has over 20 years experience in uranium. So we've been in the uranium industry a long time. We're veterans. We have a good knowledge about all aspects of uranium exploration and mining and financing uranium companies. So we just haven't popped into this industry at a time when it's become sexy again. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've been working on the Lake Maitland project for a long time. I've been associated with that project for almost 20 years, probably 20 years exactly now. So, we're very committed to the project and unlocking all of the value that exists. And we're excited, as I said, to be doing that at a time when the uranium price is near triple digits rather than around the $20 a pound mark. It's been a long winter, decades-long winter since Fukushima. So just urge all investors to look at what we have, how valuable it is, and that our valuation is so low compared to what we actually do have, and to take a view that, okay, in WA at the moment, maybe the policy is not so favourable, but assuming that changes, we could be in production sooner than an Athabasca play or another mine in Africa with the various political risks. The bifurcation in the market between Eastern uranium supply and Western uranium supply helps change policy here in Australia. Like, if the world needs Australia with its vast uranium resources to start mining and supplying, there will be a premium for our product because we're in a secure, stable jurisdiction and we're reliable. The government's not going to expropriate your asset, and we run by the rule of law. So this bifurcation also helps companies like Toro and jurisdictions in Australia where we need the government to have an appropriate policy readjustment.
Great. Well, Richard, this has been a fantastic conversation. I will put a link in the description below to Toro Energy's website as well as social media for people who want to check it out. Looking forward to keeping up to date with the company, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jesse. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.